Let's start with a basic pie chart. And the reason we start with some of these charts is because what we want to do in data science, remember, we're exploring, we're trying to understand, we're trying to be curious here. So we're trying to understand what's the deal with this data? That's what we keep asking us. Well, what's the deal here? What is it trying to tell us? And so what we want to do is we want to start with something basic. We kind of just want to get a feel for the data. We kind of want to feel for what's going on here. What does the data look like? And that sort of thing. So we'll start with the basics. So the first, before we jump into the pie chart, let's take a look at the data. So this is the data I'm using. And it has for several different cities. I can't remember how many different cities. It has 10 years of data from 2010 to 2019. It has the city, state, year, number of shark attacks, number of ice cream cones sold, and the average temperature for that year. Okay, so let's do some analysis with that data. And so if I want to use Plotly, I'm going to use a portion of Plotly called Plotly Express. So I'm going to import pandas, of course, to play with the data, and I'm going to import plotly.express as px, because typing Plotly Express every time, too much work for me, obviously. And so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take that CSV file that I just showed you, comma separated values, and we're going to load that into pandas, read CSV. So we have a data frame here. And before we start looking at charts, let's really quickly look at this data frame. So let's run that. So here's my data frame. I have 200 rows by 6 columns. So I have 20 different cities with 10 rows of data each. Okay, so I could print df.shape. I could print df.info. Okay, so there's all my information and all of my data. I think I want to, there we go. That's what I want. Okay, so it's telling me a little bit about the data type here, city, state. These are all integers. And there is my information. So I kind of know a little bit about what kind of data I'm looking at and that sort of thing. So let's comment that out, and let's scroll on down here to our first Plotly figure. And so first thing I want to do is I want to create a pie chart. I want to kind of see, like, what does this data look like? That's kind of where I'm starting out, is what's the general shape of this data. So I'm going to group the ice cream sales by state. And then I'm going to, in each state, I'm just going to add up all of the ice cream sales for that state. And then resetting the index just makes sure that once I create a new data frame that's grouped by state, each one has its own index. Next, I'm going to actually create the pie chart. Now, for what you get, I want you to pay attention to this. This is one very long line of code, but this is one line of code that gives you a really cool interactive pie chart. So I'm using total ice cream sales by state. That's the new data frame. The values are taken from ice cream sales, and the labels are taken from state. This is just given the title, right? The title of that chart, which is totally optional. And then I'm telling it to use state to generate the color for that. So each state gets its own color. So let's take a look at that. And there is my pie chart using ice cream sales by state. Florida and California are the top two. and then it drops off pretty swiftly after that. But if you look at the data, what you'll notice is that California and Florida have the most number of cities. So that may be not very useful in terms of understanding what's going on there. What I'd like to know is, let's change this to city, because the city, each city should be a little bit closer to equal. So I'm going to go city. And what happens if I take the color out of there? If I don't specify where the color comes from, let's regenerate that. And it just does it by default. So it figures out these are the cities. And so there's still a pretty big difference. Ocean City, Fort Lauderdale, these top four are in the 5 to 6% range. And it goes on down to some of these smaller cities like Honolulu at 3.36. So that just kind of gives me an idea of, are all these cities basically equal? Not really. Some of them are almost twice as many sales as the other ones. So that may help me understand later on how I want to weight that data. Because I know if Honolulu seems to have a lot of shark attacks per ice cream cone, I know that they have way fewer ice cream cones sold in Honolulu, probably because they're selling Hawaiian shaved ice instead. I don't know. But if this has a big impact on the number of shark attacks per ice cream, then I know that maybe that one shouldn't have as much weight assigned to it. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so that is the pie chart, and that helps me understand kind of the distribution of things. Another way to look at things in a descriptive way is